A chain screams, while a door that shouldn't exist slams shut. That sound is older than the nation that pretends not to hear it. Listen closely, closer than comfort allows, because the silence that follows is not mercy, it is design. I'm not supposed to tell you this, not like this, not at all. The records insist on order, on dates stitched into ledgers like clean sutures, but what they never teach you is how history hides its crimes, in an oubliette of footnotes, in margins gnawed thin by time, in a nation's practiced amnesia. If you hear a whisper beneath my voice, don't trust it, or perhaps trust only that. The room is sepulchral, lit by a single reluctant bulb. It hums as if annoyed to be awake. Papers lie in piles that look accidental but are not, every stack a small ossuary of names reduced to ink. I run my fingers across the surface of a page and feel the raised scar where a clerk pressed too hard, as though trying to bruise the truth into submission. This is not a story about chains alone. It is about malice with excellent penmanship. There is a smell here, the copper tang of old blood mixed with dust and damp paper, sweet and sour at once, as if the room remembers a wound and refuses to heal. The temperature dips when I open the box, the way cellars breathe out their cold. Inside, a shipping manifest, a torn map, and a name written once, then crossed out so violently the ink tore the page. Jabari Mansa, a vestige left behind by someone who thought erasure was the same as absolution. You might ask why this name matters. You shouldn't. Questions are dangerous in rooms like this. Still, listen. The narrator you've been given is undeniable by design. I will show you what I found, and you will decide what to believe. The truth, when it appears, often does so sideways. At 20 seconds in, the ledger opens to a page that was never meant to be read. The ink is fresh in the way nightmares are, timeless. There is a mark beside Jabari Mansa's name, a symbol used only once in the entire book, and then, abruptly, his line ends, not with death, with silence. Why would a nation delete a man without killing him? The paper rasped under my thumb, a dry whisper like leaves dragged across stone. My skin prickled, the room's chill sharpened, as if the air itself had learned a new fact and recoiled. The symbol, inscrutable, almost playful, resembled a crown inverted or a shackle smiling. I checked the index. The symbol did not exist. That absence felt intentional, like a locked door pretending to be a wall. There's a sound you learn to recognize when archives resist you, the low creak of shelves settling, the tick of a clock that speeds up when you look away. I felt my jaw tighten, my breathing shortened, caught on the way in, then released in thin, uneven streams. Someone had gone to great lengths to make sure Jabari Mansa remained a rumor at best, a mistake at worst. Outside, rain stitched the night together with needles of light. Inside, the bulb flickered, and for a heartbeat, the room went black. When it returned, the map had shifted, just enough to notice. Lines traced from the African coast to ports that wore different names then, names that changed to outrun their own guilt. One port was circled twice. The pressure tore the paper. Whoever circled it wanted it to bleed. Run your finger along the map and feel the grit where salt once lived. It's cold now, colder than it should be, as if the sea never quite left the room. I won't tell you what I think happened to Jabari Mansa. I won't tell you yet. The documents refuse to cooperate when rushed. They demand patience and complicity. So stay, lean closer, lower your voice with mine, because the next page doesn't just name him, it hints at why he terrified people who wrote laws for a living. And if that name was erased once, Who else was buried alive with it? A match flares in a windowless room, and for an instant the darkness flinches. The flame trembles the way a hand does when it knows what it's about to reveal. I didn't strike it for light. I struck it for permission. Some truths refuse to be read under fluorescent bulbs. They require fire, however small, to feel honest. The ledger lay open where we left it, pages splayed like ribs. I swear it had not been this heavy before. Paper remembers pressure. The name Jabari Mansa appears again, this time not crossed out, but altered. Letters nudged, spacing tightened, as if the scribe leaned closer and decided proximity was dangerous. The handwriting shifts mid-line. You can see the moment doubt enters the wrist. The ink darkens where the pen hesitates, pooling like a bruise. This is how lies announce themselves, not with bold strokes, but with indecision. I trace the margin notes, numbers that don't sum, dates that arrive early and leave late. A ship listed twice under two captains who never sailed together. The ledger wants to be believed. That's its most damning quality. I feel my breath go thin, my throat tightening, as if the room itself has wrapped a cord around it. Fingertips numb, nails bite skin. The body knows when arithmetic turns predatory. There's a smell now, old leather and smoke with a ghost of tar, as if the ledger spent a night pressed against a ship's hull. The temperature drops a degree when I turn the page. It's subtle, but the chill clings to the wrists, crawls up the forearms, settles behind the eyes. I find a symbol repeated in the margins, faint, almost playful. The same inverted crown, the same smiling shackle, inscrutable in intent, precise in placement. A footnote references a transfer for safekeeping. Safekeeping from whom? The footnote ends with a flourish that tears the paper. Someone pressed hard enough to leave a scar. This is not clerical error. This is choreography. If Jabari Mansa was cargo, why does the ledger treat him like contraband? And who was afraid he arrived intact? I move deeper into the stacks, where the ceiling lowers and the air thickens. Shelves crowd in like witnesses who won't meet your eye. Here the archives sweat. Moisture beads on spines, dust clots in the corners. The floor changes texture, grit to smooth stone, cool underfoot, the kind of cold that climbs bones and refuses to leave. An oubliette without chains, engineered to keep secrets by making them uncomfortable to hold. A crate waits with no label. Inside, correspondence tied with twine so dry it flakes at the touch. The letters argue with the ledger. Dates disagree. Tonnage fluctuates. A captain complains of the man who won't be counted, of nights broken by pacing overhead, of orders to keep him below, not with the others. The language grows sharp, then careful. Careful is where malice hides when it wants to be respectable. I read until my jaw aches from clenching. Breaths come shallow, jagged, as if I'm climbing stairs that keep adding themselves. One letter mentions a temporary holding, a word used when you plan for permanence but fear saying it aloud. Another hints at a structure beneath the docks, stone-lined, soundless, an ossuary for the living, perhaps, or worse, a place to wait. The smell shifts, brine and mildew with a copper note that pricks the tongue. The air turns damp, the temperature dips again, sudden as a held breath released. My skin tightens. I imagine the texture of those walls, slick with algae, seams packed with lime, a place that eats echoes. If Jabari Mansa was separated, what did they hope separation would solve? What grows dangerous when kept among others? The map reappears, this time annotated by a different hand, angles corrected, routes tightened like a noose, ports renamed, streets rerouted,
Power rearranged itself on paper. I noticed something new, a notation beside the circled port. 3 letters scratched thin, not initials, a warning. I won't say them yet. Names gain power when spoken, and this room has ears. The paper rasps as I fold the corner back. Beneath it, a stain blooms, rust-colored, irregular. The texture is wrong for ink. The stain has weight. I press a finger to it and feel the paper give, softened by something that once had warmth. My breath stutters. A thin sound escapes before I catch it. The body betrays you when proximity turns intimate. There's a cold draft now, a cellar's exhale, raising gooseflesh along the neck. The bulb dims. For a moment the map looks 3-dimensional, roots lifting like scars. Jabari Mansa's line doesn't end at a port. It bends inland, into places that don't advertise themselves. The ledger never mentions this. The letters do, quietly, as if ashamed. A final note, unsigned, suggests a payment rerouted to avoid attention. Avoidance is a skill. It requires practice. It leaves vestiges, misalignments, shadows where facts should stand. I feel the paper's grain under my thumb, rough as unhealed skin. This isn't erasure, it's containment. If a man is too dangerous to arrive, too valuable to kill, and too visible to keep, where do you put him so the nation can sleep? Stay with me. The next descent has stairs, and they are worn.
A bell tolls underwater, and the sound arrives late, thick, swollen, wrong. I didn't hear it at first. My body did. A pressure behind the eyes, a taste of iron blooming along the gums. That's how the descent begins, not with steps, but with symptoms. The stairs were there, just as promised, cupped into stone and polished by years of reluctance. Someone had gone down often enough to teach the rock their weight. Each step steals a little warmth. It's incremental, polite. The temperature slides from cool to cellar cold, the kind that stiffens knuckles and makes breath show even when it shouldn't. The wall is slick, lime and algae fused into a skin that doesn't belong to any living thing. I run a palm along it and pull back fast. The texture clings, not sticky, possessive. Halfway down, the smell arrives, brine, rotted, sweet, mixed with old oil and something coppered and animal. It curls into the nose and refuses to leave, like a rumor with legs. I steady myself on the rail, iron pitted into a lace of rust. Flakes break off and bite the skin. The rail was painted once. Someone cared about appearances at the mouth of the hole. At the landing, a door waits. Oak, swollen with damp, its grain raised like scar tissue. There's a slot at eye level, not for light, for watching. The hinges complain softly when I lean in, a thin whine like a reprimand. My breathing goes shallow, uneven, and my shoulders creep upward as if trying to make less of me. The slot frames a room that doesn't want witnesses. Inside, rings set into the walls at regular intervals. Careful spacing, measured mercy. The floor slopes toward a drain clogged with history. This is not a dungeon. It is an oubliette with manners, designed to hold a man without acknowledging him. Why build a place this precise if it was meant to be temporary? Who were they planning to keep long enough to forget? I step through, and the door seals with a sound like a held breath finally released. The chill sharpens. It climbs the calves, settles in the hips, gnaws at the lower back. The air is wet enough to bead on eyelashes. Somewhere, water drips in a metronome that refuses to keep time. I count anyway. Counting is a defense. On the far wall, scratches, tallies, names, shapes that start as letters and give up. One word repeats, carved deep enough to shadow itself. Mansa. Not once, not twice, over and over,
as if repetition could bruise permanence into stone. The grooves are rough. My fingertips rasp along them, grainy with grit and lime. This wasn't written in a moment. This took days, weeks, a wrist stiffening and unstiffening around the same idea. The smell shifts as I move closer. Mildew recedes, replaced by a copper tang that prickles the tongue. Old blood, yes, but mixed with ash and vinegar. Preservation attempts. I swallow and feel my throat resist, a narrow gate. My jaw locks. Nails dig crescents into my palms until the skin breaks. Pain focuses. Pain keeps you here. A ledger fragment lies on a crate near the drain, paper puckered by moisture. The handwriting matches the letters upstairs, the same careful hand, now rushed. Supplies listed, food reduced, exercise permitted, scratched out and replaced with conversation restricted. Conversation is dangerous. It spreads. It teaches rooms to listen. This space is sepulchral without being quiet. It hums with held voices. The rings are worn smooth where wrists would twist, searching for mercy in rotation. This wasn't punishment. It was management. Malice wearing a clerk's smile. If they counted his days, what were they afraid he'd do with his nights? What survives when a man is denied witnesses? Behind the rings, a second door hides in the stone, seams packed so clean you'd miss them if you weren't looking for escape routes. It opens sideways, grudgingly, revealing a corridor that bends, not straight, never straight. The walls here are dry, warmer by a degree. The floor changes texture again, from slick stone to packed earth over brick, a deliberate comfort. Someone planned movement. The smell thins, replaced by dust and old lime. It feels almost kind until you notice the ceiling drop, forcing a stoop. Kindness with conditions. My breath catches on the bend, then evens out into thin, careful streams. The corridor ends in a room with a desk bolted to the floor and a chair missing its back. Tools rest in a tray. Quill, ink, wax. Not torture. Administration. On the desk, a map fragment marked with the same inverted crown, routes inland, names redacted with wax seals pressed too hard, cracking their own authority. A note reads, "Transfer delayed. Subject insists on names." Insists. The word leans, demands dignity without raising its voice. The temperature rises here, faint but real, like a body had once warmed the space and left an afterimage. I touch the desk. The wood is smooth, oiled. Someone sat here often. The grain feels alive under the thumb. I imagine the sound of breathing across from me, slow, controlled, unbroken by pleading, a presence that refuses to be made small. This wasn't where Jabari Mansa was broken. This was where he was negotiated with. The inscrutable part isn't why they hid him, it's why they listened. If a nation built rooms to contain a conversation, what was said inside them, and who decided it could never be heard? Stay, the next part names the names that wax tried to smother, and wax melts.
A wax seal cracks in the dark, and the sound is louder than a gunshot. It splits with a small, indecent pop, authority surrendering to heat. The corridor exhales as if relieved. Names hate confinement. They push, they sweat, they find seams. I lift the fragment from the desk and feel the residue smear warm against my thumb, tacky and faintly sweet. Power always smells faintly of sugar when it melts. The first seal gives way, then the second. Each break releases a breath of dust and old oil. The temperature ticks up another degree, subtle but undeniable, like a body leaning closer. Beneath the wax, names written carefully, then scratched thin and rewritten by a steadier hand. These aren't aliases, they're anchors, men who owned rooms, men who owned routes, men who owned silence. The ink here is different, denser. It sits on the paper like it expects to be challenged. I read slowly. My breathing goes shallow and rhythmic, a metronome trying to keep me present. Fingertips buzz where they touch the page, as if the letters carry charge. One name appears 3 times across 3 documents that swear they've never met. A port official, a magistrate, a benefactor whose philanthropy purchased a chapel and a reputation. There's a smell now, lamp oil and dust, with a copper edge that nips at the tongue. The room feels warmer, but the air grows heavy, pressing the sternum. The paper rasp is louder than it should be. Someone nearby coughs. No, wood settling. I tell myself that and move on. A marginal note catches the light. He will not accept numbers. Not accept, as if dignity were an inconvenience. Another note, hurried. He insists on names spoken aloud. Insists again. The word repeats like a knock that refuses to learn manners. If a captive demands names, what happens to the captor's mask? What breaks first, the chain or the lie that fastens it? Upstairs, the ledger awaits like a witness who's rehearsed too long. I lay the map fragments beside it and watch contradictions bloom. Columns tilt, totals falter. The same inverted crown appears where payments spike without explanation. Someone paid for quiet. Quiet is never cheap. The chill returns as I open the ledger, cold air sliding down the spine, collecting between shoulder blades. My hands feel clumsy, thickened by temperature, as if the room wants me slower. I comply. Speed favors alibis. Slowness exposes seams. I find the line where Jabari Mansa becomes an absence. No death recorded, no transfer acknowledged. Instead, a ledger trick, his weight redistributed across others, as if accounting could digest a man. The sums balance only if you stop counting breath. I stop breathing for a beat without meaning to. When it returns, it comes in thin, uneven pulls. A scent of mildew rises as I turn a dampened page, undercut by something sharper, vinegar, perhaps, used to erase ink. The page bears a shadow where his name once lived, a palimpsest bruise. Vestige is too small a word for this. This is a wound that learned to pretend. I cross-reference the names from the wax with shipping schedules and civic minutes. The dates align like teeth. A vote delayed, a shipment expedited, a donation announced, a sermon preached on order. The room tightens around me, shelves creak, the bulb hums with irritation. This is not a conspiracy, it's a choreography. Everyone hits their mark and calls it coincidence. The ledger wants to be believed. It almost convinces me, until I notice a clerk's flourish repeated by 3 different hands. Training. Shared malice, standardized. If the books agree, who taught them to lie the same way? And how many witnesses were taught to forget? The final document isn't filed. It's folded and tucked behind a register, like a note slipped under a door. The paper is rougher, cheaper. The handwriting slants, urgent. This one sweats. I unfold it and feel the grain bite my skin, dry and stubborn. The temperature dips again, sudden enough to raise gooseflesh along the forearms. It's a statement, not sworn, not notarized. A dock worker's account, written at night by a hand that learned letters late. He describes a man brought below not in irons, but in conversation, escorted by officials who kept their hats on indoors. He describes a voice, calm, measured, that corrected them when they mispronounced his name. He describes nights when the water stilled, as if listening. The scent shifts, brine returns, threaded with tar and a copper note that tightens the jaw. My nails press crescents into my palms again, blood beads. Focus. The dock worker writes of a meeting inland, of papers signed and unsigned, of a promise that frightened the men who heard it. He refuses to write the promise itself. He says, some words are heavier than paper.
At the bottom, a postscript. They tried to teach him fear. He taught them memory. The ink thins there, as if the pen faltered or the hand shook, or both. The page smells faintly of smoke. Someone held it close to a flame once, testing its courage. This is the ossuary of testimony, bones stacked without names, except one, Jabari Mansa, written carefully, corrected once, insisted upon. If memory was the weapon, where did he aim it, and who decided it had to be buried before it learned to spread? Stay. The next descent isn't into stone, it's into the city above, where streets wear new names and old guilt. The air there is warmer, the lies breathe easier.
A parade passes overhead, and the drums sound hollow, like knuckles rapping on a coffin lid. The city is loud in the way a crowd gets loud when it's afraid of silence. I surface into daylight that feels borrowed, thin as a promise made too quickly. The streets have learned new names since the ledger's time, but they keep old habits. Stone remembers footsteps. Brick remembers weight. I follow the map inland, letting the city lead me where it pretends not to go. The pavement changes underfoot, cobbles smoothed to glass, then patched with asphalt that sinks slightly when stepped on. Soft spots. The temperature lifts a degree as I turn a corner. Sun gathers between buildings like a held breath finally released. The smell here is yeast and smoke, with a copper edge that pricks the back of the throat. Lunch hour. Life rehearsing innocence. A church squats at the intersection, limestone pale as bone. Its steps are worn into shallow bowls, polished by generations of knees. Inside, the air cools abruptly, stone keeping its own counsel. Incense hangs thick, sweet and cloying, masking mildew and candle smoke. I run a finger along a pew and feel the varnish catch, tacky in places where hands lingered too long. Prayers leave residue. In the vestry, a plaque lists benefactors, familiar names, the same men who argued margins into the ledger, now cast in bronze, their letters raised and confident. My breathing shortens. I catch myself standing too straight, as if the room demands posture. The plaque's surface is warm from sunlight, an unsettling warmth that makes the metal feel alive. A pamphlet tucked behind hymnals bears a date that doesn't align. The print is uneven. A sermon on order delivered the same week a shipment expedited. The coincidence hums. I taste iron again, faint but persistent. The city doesn't deny its past, it reframes it. If a sanctuary is built with money earned below ground, where do the echoes go? Who listens when stone starts remembering? City Hall wears glass like an alibi, windows everywhere, light spilling in as if transparency were a virtue you could install. Inside, the air is conditioned to a polite chill. My skin tightens, gooseflesh rises and settles. The floors gleam, reflecting shoes and ceilings until everyone looks doubled. Duplication calms institutions. I request old permits. The clerk's smile holds a fraction too long. Papers arrive clipped, edges crisp, the smell of fresh toner overlaying dust and age. I spread them on a table and watch the story try to behave. Streets renamed, districts redrawn. A warehouse reclassified as temporary holding becomes civic storage, then community space. Language laundering location. The texture of the paper changes mid-stack, older sheets rougher, fibrous, newer ones slick, resistant. My fingertips snag. A date repeats across departments that swear they don't coordinate. The inverted crown appears again, faint like a watermark you only see when the light hits wrong. Someone trained clerks to stamp it without seeing it. The temperature dips when a file opens that shouldn't. A draft slides across ankles, cold and quick. I feel my jaw clench, breath thins. The file describes an incident, disruption contained.
No injuries listed, no names recorded. A signature at the bottom presses so hard it embosses the page. The pen wanted to tear through. A map inset shows a route through neighborhoods now marketed as historic. I walk it later and find bricks mismatched, mortar newer than it pretends to be. The smell of wet cement ghosts the air after rain. Cover-ups have sense. If bureaucracy can erase a man by renaming a building, what else disappears between departments? And who audits the spaces between stamps? At the edge of the route stands a house spared by accident or influence, condemned then forgotten. Its porch sags, boards soft underfoot, nails kissing skin when weight shifts wrong. The temperature inside drops sharply, shade and rot conspiring. Dust motes hang thick, tasting of plaster and old cloth. The smell is damp wood and mouse, undercut by a copper note that tightens the jaw. In the parlor, wallpaper peels like old scabs. Beneath it, charcoal marks, arrows, numbers, a name written and rewritten until the wall gives up. Mansa, again. The texture of the wall is gritty. Charcoal smears across my fingers, staining them gray. I rub and it spreads. Memory behaves the same way. A staircase leads down. Of course it does. The steps creak in complaint, each one negotiating my weight. Halfway, the air cools another notch. My breath fogs faintly. At the bottom, a room too carefully finished for storage, lime-washed walls, rings set at a height meant for conversation, not suspension, a desk scarred by ink and blade. Administration, again, always administration. There's a smell here that doesn't belong, oil and citrus, like furniture polish applied recently. Someone has been tending this place. The thought makes my shoulders rise, breath hitch. I steady myself on the desk. The wood is smooth, warm where sunlight once fell. A ledger fragment waits in a drawer, edges nibbled by time. It lists meetings, names, locations, a promise summarized but not written. On the back, a note in a different hand. He taught them to count differently. I press my thumb to the page and feel the paper give, soft from handling. This wasn't hidden to forget. It was hidden to be retrieved. If a house survives demolition because it holds a lesson, who comes back to study? And what do they hope the walls won't repeat? Stay. The next part follows the promise, out of rooms and into mouths that tried to swallow it.
A mouth opens in a crowded room, and the lie arrives before the breath does. It's a talent, really, how a city teaches its people to speak around certain shapes. Words curve, throats learn shortcuts. The promise didn't vanish when they hid the man, it adapted. Promises do that when they're denied paper. They find mouths. The tavern squats at the corner where maps argue. Its door sticks, wood swollen by years of spilled drink and weather. When it gives, the room exhales heat and yeast. The temperature lifts suddenly, wrapping the skin in a damp embrace. Smoke hangs low, sweet and acrid, stinging the eyes. The floor is tacky, boots peel away with a sound like reluctance. I take a seat near the wall where generations have leaned to listen without being seen. The table's surface is scarred, gouges filled with wax and beer. I run a finger along a groove and feel the grain catch, rough as a confession interrupted. My breathing slows, shallow but steady. Listening requires stillness. They tell stories here as if they're jokes, because jokes can carry knives. A dockhand mentions a man who corrected ledgers by memory alone, who spoke of weights and measures as moral choices. A cooper swears his grandfather heard a voice in the cellar that counted breaths instead of barrels. Laughter breaks, then thins. Someone coughs. Someone else looks away. The smell shifts as a fresh cask is tapped, oak and iron, with a copper note that prickles the tongue. The air grows warmer by degrees, bodies lean closer.
Names surface, then sink. The inverted crown appears scratched beneath a table, half hidden by grime. I touch it and feel the grit bite skin. This symbol travels well. A woman with hands like rope knots tells me of meetings that ended with men standing too straight, as if chastened by arithmetic. She made them say it, she says, not loud. Say the numbers and the names together. Her fingers worry the hem of her apron until threads give. Breath hitches. She stops. If a promise survives as a joke, what happens when the laughter runs out? Who remembers the punchline when the room goes quiet? Sunday brings a different heat, pressed suits and perfume, bodies packed into wooden certainty. The church holds the warmth like a lung. Incense swirls thick and sweet, masking old damp. My skin prickles, sweat beads along the spine. The pew's varnish is slick, resistant. Knees press wood polished by obedience. The sermon is about order, it always is. The words stack neatly, each one a brick. The preacher's voice finds its rhythm, rising where the ceiling arches, falling where confession is expected. He quotes figures, shipping, harvest, growth, numbers that behave. I watch his hands. When he reaches the ledger of his text, his fingers hesitate, a tremor, ink memory. The pamphlet today is new paper, smooth, bright. It smells of toner and glue, sharp enough to sting. I fold it and feel the crease resist. On the back, a footnote cites an authority who appears nowhere else, a vestige masquerading as foundation. In the vestry after, a ledger rests open for donations, names written with confidence, amounts rounded to soothe. I add a coin and feel the metal's cool bite against my palm before it drops, sound swallowed by felt. The temperature dips in that instant, a seller's breath passing through the room. Someone notices, eyes flicker. A marginal note in the old hand appears again on a different page, tucked into a sermon outline archived for decades. Count what counts you. The phrase cuts like paper, thin, precise, inscrutable until it isn't. If pulpits borrow arithmetic to bless power, what happens when arithmetic refuses the blessing? Who audits a sermon that learned to lie? The courthouse smells of polish and rain, lemon oil over wet wool. Marble cools the soles through leather. The temperature drops in polite steps as you enter, each one a reminder of gravity. Voices soften here. Authority prefers whispers. I sit in the back where echoes do their work. A case unfolds about property lines and transfers. The language is careful, bloodless. A map is entered into evidence, routes traced, boundaries drawn. I recognize the bend, the same inland curve that never made it into the ledger. My breath shortens, catches, then evens. Focus. A clerk reads figures. They don't sum. The judge frowns, a small crease appearing like a crack in porcelain. The room cools another degree. A draft slides along the floor. I smell dust disturbed from old files, undercut by a copper note that tightens the jaw. The clerk corrects himself. Still wrong. Murmurs ripple. An elderly witness is called, not for this case officially. He speaks anyway, answering questions not asked. He describes a meeting years ago, a promise exchanged in a room that smelled of lime and oil. He doesn't name the man, he names the effect. He was told to count people, he says, voice thin but steady, count them out loud, together. His fingers curl into his coat until knuckles pale. Breath rasps, then steadies. The judge clears his throat. The sound is loud in the hush. The testimony is struck from the record. Ink scratches, paper rasps. The echo lingers, sepulchral, refusing dismissal. Outside, rain taps the windows like a metronome that learned impatience. As we file out, the old man brushes past me. His sleeve is rough, wool biting skin. He smells of rain and something else, old iron perhaps. He leans in, not quite a whisper. "He said promises walk," he murmurs. "You can't chain them without teaching them where to go." If a promise survives as a testimony without a name, how do you cross-examine it? And what verdict does a city reach when echoes won't sit down? Stay. The next part follows the promise beyond rooms and rituals, into bodies that carried it forward when paper failed.
A gavel falls in an empty room, and the echo votes yes. Late justice has a sound. It isn't loud. It arrives like breath returning after a long submersion, ragged at first, then steadier, stubborn. The file waits on the table where no one sits anymore. Corners blunted by handling, paper softened by years of being opened and shut without permission. I open the folder, and the room cools a degree, polite but insistent. The smell is dust and lemon oil with a copper edge that tightens the jaw. Pages whisper as they move, rasp, pause, rasp, like a witness choosing words. The inverted crown appears where seals once lived, impressed so lightly you have to tilt the page to see it. Authority tried to erase itself. It failed. A Fedovitz stack in a quiet ossuary of signatures, dock workers, clerks, healers, foremen, not sworn together, not coordinated, yet the cadence aligns, numbers spoken aloud, names corrected, meetings where hats stayed on. My breathing shortens, then steadies as the pattern asserts itself. This isn't rumor, it's a chorus that learned harmony without rehearsal. The temperature dips when I reach the back, an annex added later, paper newer, toner sharp. A memo admits procedural misalignment. A clerk's flourish presses hard enough to bruise the sheet. Malice wearing remedial language. I feel the texture under my thumb, slick where someone tried to smooth the truth flat. If evidence stands without a courtroom, who does it face? And what verdict forms when the judge is time? No cameras, no speeches, just a meeting room with chairs that remember weight. The air is warm from bodies, then cools as the windows crack open. Rain arrives metallic on stone, washing the city's breath. The smell shifts, wet concrete and paper, clean enough to sting. Names are read, out loud, together. Some stumble, corrections follow. A few hands shake, knuckles whitening around pens. Breaths come shallow, jagged, then slow as the ritual takes hold. Counting becomes communal. Arithmetic turns moral again. A clerk pauses, jaw tight, and tries to skip a line. The room answers, soft, firm, say it. A document is signed that does not promise punishment, it promises record, a return of names to places they were denied, streets, scholarships, ledgers amended with footnotes that refuse to be quiet. The pen scratches, paper rasps, the sound feels earned. The temperature lifts slightly as the last name lands. Warmth spreads the way relief does when it realizes it's allowed. Outside, the rain eases. Someone laughs once, short, surprised, then covers their mouth, embarrassed by hope. If justice arrives without spectacle, does it still count? Or is counting the spectacle we were missing? At the water's edge, the city exhales. Evening cools the skin. Gooseflesh rises and settles. The smell is brine and diesel, threaded with citrus from a vendor's peel. I unfold the final page. It's simple. One name centered, spelled correctly, no symbols. Jabari Mansa. I say it out loud. The word meets the air and stays. My breath catches, then deepens, filling space I didn't know was vacant. The paper's texture is honest, no gloss, no tricks. A vestige becomes a foundation. The inverted crown appears nowhere here. It's no longer needed.
People pass, some slow. A child asks who that was. The answer comes plain. A man who taught numbers to behave. The water laps, cool and patient. The temperature drops with dusk, gentle as closure. I fold the page and feel its edges firm, unafraid of handling. You were not supposed to hear this. That was the plan. But plans rot when they're buried alive. The unreliable narrator steps back now because the record no longer needs protection. It can stand. If a nation learns to count its dead and living together, what does it become? And if you heard the name, what will you do with it? The file closes. The echo doesn't.
A heartbeat answers a drum no one is playing. It's not metaphor. Put your fingers to your wrist. Feel that insistence. Promises migrate when ink dries up. They choose warmer hosts. They choose flesh. The workshop is narrow, brick sweating through flaking paint. Heat gathers here, real heat, iron and breath and friction conspiring. The temperature rises fast, wrapping the skin until sweat beads along the hairline. The smell is oil and metal with a copper tang that settles at the back of the tongue. Tools hang where hands expect them. Memory has ergonomics. I watch the workers measure twice, thrice, not for efficiency, for justice. A beam is weighed again because the first number felt wrong. A young man's fingers tremble as he resets the scale, breath coming shallow and quick, then slowing when the balance finally settles. The old foreman nods, once, approval without applause. On the wall, scratched beneath layers of grime, the inverted crown appears again, small, almost shy. Below it, a phrase half erased, "Count us." The texture of the brick is rough, biting the fingertip when I trace it. Chalk dust clings, cool and fine. Someone coughs. The heat presses closer. A story circulates without asking permission, of a man who corrected weights by reciting names, of nights spent counting breaths to keep time honest. No one says Jabari Mansa. Names travel better when folded. But the cadence matches, the insistence matches, the promise walks. If labor learns a moral, who taught it? And why does the lesson survive the teacher's erasure? Night cools the air by degrees, gentle as a hand on the back. The courtyard fills with bodies and sound. Drums thud low, skin stretched tight, the vibrations settling in the ribs. The smell shifts, smoke and citrus peel, sweat and rain-soaked stone. The temperature dips, then rises with movement. Breath fogs briefly, then clears. The song starts simple, called in response, counting woven into melody, 1 for the road, 2 for the load, 3 for the hands that carry. Voices stack, harmony corrects what arithmetic alone cannot. I feel my chest tighten, breath hitching as the rhythm finds my pulse. Nails dig crescents into palms until the skin warms and yields. A dancer stumbles. The circle closes, adjusts, redistributes weight. No one is left to fall alone. The song names places without naming them, routes without maps. A child sings the numbers out of order. The elder corrects gently, smiling. Correction without punishment, teaching without paper cuts. The air tastes of iron when the chorus hits, sharp and bright. Somewhere a window opens. Someone listens from the dark. The sound carries. It always does. This is how promises spread, through lungs, through calloused hands, through nights that refuse to stay quiet. If a song can keep accounts, what happens when ledgers burn? Who inherits the math when the books lie? The healer's room is cool, a relief after the dance. The temperature drops enough to prickle goose flesh along the arms. The smell is clean, herbs crushed into oil, vinegar sharp as a wake-up call. The table's surface is smooth, worn by care.
I lay a hand on it and feel the grain welcome weight. She shows me scars that tell stories without asking, a line across a shoulder, rope memory, hash marks along a rib, counting days, names inked faintly beneath the skin, letters softened by time, vestiges made portable. My breath thins, caught somewhere high in the chest. The room hums softly, sepulchral without being sad. She explains the practice plainly. When paper disappears, skin remembers. When names are dangerous, bodies hold them until mouths are safe. The oil warms under her palms as she works, heat blooming where it touches. The copper note returns, faint, grounding. Pain becomes instruction. Care becomes curriculum. A question slips out before I can stop it, about origins. She pauses, fingers resting, pressure gentle but firm. The pause stretches. Air cools another notch. Finally, "A man taught us to count ourselves," she says. "He said if they take your name, keep it warm." The inverted crown appears again, tattooed small behind an ear. Smiling shackle, reclaimed. The promise didn't just walk, it learned to hide in plain sight. If bodies are archives, what happens when they gather? And what can a nation erase when memory learns to breathe? Stay. The last part opens the file they never closed and asks what justice sounds like when it arrives late.